It's time now for Harm Reduction. Heard every Tuesday at 7 a.m. with Will Beaton. Cutting Edge Radio, where we'll ask the questions others don't want to ask. Now here's your host, Will Beaton.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Harm Reduction Report. I am Willard T-Belly, and I'm still so stoked about this intro music. It feels like I'm on a jet plane or on an aircraft carrier or something, and it feels good. So today we're going to continue our conversation about stigma. We've been working on this video project with the Grand Forks Public Health Department about stigma in the community. We realized as we're making this, interviewing people, that it covers a lot more than just the initial stigma we kind of set out to illuminate, stigma surrounding substance use and things like that. We found it comes in almost everybody I talked to had a completely different angle at what stigma is, or I guess has a story that's reflective of a totally different aspect of the nature of the stigma thing that we're talking about. So this episode of the Harm Reduction Report will have 3 about 20-minute long interviews after this introduction. That will be the video of which, so all of this is we have video of, and I'm editing it into the video, but we pulled the audio out for this episode. So, and it's kind of fun because it shows you how hard it is to interview people sometimes about stigmatic topics, and it's always embarrassing for me to listen to footage of me interviewing people because I always feel like, oh geez, why did I say it? Why did I ask that, or something? So we kind of just show the whole interview process with the audio we pulled for the episode here, so that's kind of cool. And the people in the interviews we're going to be looking at are my friends Luke and Lizzy, and also my own interview. Luke and Lizzy live someplace magical called the HoffSoup house in Minneapolis, and it's a place I've spent many, many nights because I'm always needing a place to stay. And I just wanted to point out that the couches we're sitting on when we do these interviews, I've slept on dozens of times. So anyway, I love these people, and I'm happy to have them here. So here's the first interview.
Even remembering when the first time I had sex, like I was ashamed to tell all of my friends, and I even had a friend tell me she would be really mad at me if she found out I wasn't a virgin. And so then I felt even more like, I guess, stigma, because it's coming from all levels of support. Like,
you couldn't even tell your friends.
Yep. And then one day that I did have the courage to tell one of my friends, she also was carrying that secret around.
I never got the sex talk growing up.
Me neither.
Of any kind.
I didn't even get how to deal with my period in a proper sense.
Yeah.
Like, as I told you, my mom just gave me panty liners, and panty liners don't even help collect the menstrual cycle. It's just to collect leaks. So I was just doing it wrong.
You're doing it wrong. And you didn't know?
I didn't know.
Where?
I don't know when I figured it out either. I don't know how long it took me to figure it out. And I didn't understand that cramps were, like, I would get these awful pains before I'd get my period, and I had no idea that it was related, that the pain I'd feel was directly connected, saying, my body saying, like, you're going to get your period soon. No idea.
I wonder where your parents thought it would, where you were going to learn all that, I think about my parents too, right?
Well, I think now it's easier because there's like Google, or Quora. There's different media outlets, forums where if you have access to internet and it's not filtered by your parents, or I don't know how that works actually. Parental. I'm sure that exists though.
Have you seen that Black Mirror episode with it's like this
oh yeah
censoring software?
Yep.
that the mother installs in the daughter.
Yep.
She can see out her eyes and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. I could totally see people buying that and trying to blur everything out. But then how do you expect them to learn about it?
Mm-hmm.
Did I tell you that in 7th or 6th grade, I think, in my health class, we were learning about the menstrual cycle, and Quinn Bauman puked on me.
Oh.
Because
He was grossed out.
I think so. I don't know.
That's kind of funny.
I remember the animation that was on the screen right when it happened.
And see, that's the other problem. We're showing animations. Like, that's not real. And so you're detached from this imagery because it's not real people. It's a cartoon that's making a caricature out of...
A euphemism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here, I'm having my period.
Did you remember when you were little that at some point in school you were going to get the talk in school and that you're going to have your parents sign this thing, you know, and they make this big deal that you're going to watch a certain video someday? For some reason, when I was, must have been in like 3rd grade or younger, I knew that the 5th graders get this certain day where they learn about...
I went to a Catholic elementary school, so that's probably why.
What school?
Holy Family.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there was no sex ed in the Holy Family?
There was. It was called New Creation.
Oh.
And I believe it was geared towards, well, obviously, like when you're married, but I don't ever remember it explicitly saying this is how sex works. And I probably still have the book somewhere in my old belongings. I'd be curious to look at it now to see what's actually in there, but...
So looking back on this whole process of learning,
Mm-hmm.
can you imagine what would have made it better or different or a little less stigmatizing?
The friend who said she'd be mad at me if she ever found out I wasn't a virgin, I was afraid to tell her for a very, very, very long time. And that stigma, I would say, like, kind of created a gap in our friendship of us honestly, like, knowing each other as adult women, because I didn't feel like I could freely express that part of myself.
Do you think there's a problem if you were not the only one feeling that way, feeling the stigma? Why does it matter if a whole generation of kids growing up in Grand Forks feel that pressure or not? Does it matter?
I would definitely say that it matters because, I mean, when I'm looking at myself, I didn't know what I was doing. So when I was in either 7th grade in middle school, a guy flashed me outside of my bedroom window. They're like, a friend calls me up and they're like, oh, look outside of your window. And I looked and he showed me his penis and I was horrified and appalled, and I'm still kind of appalled to this day because I don't understand why you would do that, but boys are, I don't know what provoked him. Anyway, I sincerely believe that I was pregnant and I was anxious and it caused a lot of stress, and I ended up like calling a gynecologist and asking her, and then she like asked me very thorough questions. Did the penis touch the vagina? And I was like, no, it wasn't anywhere near. And then she's like, you're not pregnant. And I was like, oh, okay, cool.
When she's explaining that to you, did she realize really what you were saying, what you didn't understand about how sex works? When she is explaining it to you.
I think she sounded annoyed.
Really?
Yeah. That I was like interrupting her busy schedule. I'm not a patient. I'm just this random person calling. Maybe she thought it was a joke. Didn't take it as sincere, because why would you think you're pregnant if a guy flashed you?
So why did you? Do you know?
Maybe it was paranoia and also shame, probably, like growing up Catholic as I did and having to confess these things, or fear of God and being, I don't know, I thought maybe I'd go to hell, I don't know. And I probably made up things in my mind. I don't know why I thought the way that I did, but I know that it's not okay that I went, like at 13, that was my understanding of sex. And in my household, it was never talked about or discussed. Nothing about the female body. My brothers were given condoms when they were in high school. I just got, from my father, he would say, I don't agree with you going steady with that boy. And I think what he was getting at is like, I don't want you having sex. I know how boys work and that's all they want from you. And I think I had a lot of that anxiety within my first relationship. Like I was afraid, like holding hands was like super scary. The first time I ever kissed a guy, I was super scared, and just everything leading up to that wasn't like exciting. It was very scary for me because I don't know, you're told so many times that, okay, this is where it's gonna go, this is the end goal, and then not.
So even when you had that moment where you called a doctor to ask this question, you didn't feel comfortable asking your parents that same question?
Oh, no. Nope.
And that's so crazy, because, I mean, yeah, it'd still be crazy if somebody chose to have sex with somebody and they still felt afraid to talk to their mom about it. But you had nothing to do with the fact that someone flashed you.
I even asked my friends.
You didn't consent to being flashed. And you still thought that was enough, like that you should feel guilty for being flashed. Mm-hmm. And that you can't even tell your parents that you got flashed.
Well, I'm like thinking about it now, how inappropriate that was for that kid to do that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. What do you think your parents would have said then if you had asked them right away? I got flashed.
I think they would say you're never allowed to hang out with that person again, and say, oh, they're a nasty boy, stay away. Maybe they would talk to their parents, and maybe I didn't want to create drama. So maybe that was also part of the fear of reaching out to them, is then they would reach out to his parents, I'd get him in trouble, and I obviously didn't want to. Let's say it was
like not one of your friends or somebody at your school, but just some random on the street, total random, and you asked your parents about it. As far as the like explaining what sex is to you, do you think that would have, like, if they truly realized that you thought getting flashed means that you were pregnant, do you think that would shock them into realizing, like, wow, you don't know what you need to know, and we could, tell you? Do you think if you got over that stigma in that moment, that the rest of that would have been less anxious for you?
I think it would have made my parents, like if it was a random stranger, I think they would become more protective and overbearing than what they already were. Because they would think, oh, there's a predator out to get you, I don't know. I already had a lot of control, and I wouldn't want to add more control to my strict living environment as a woman.
Yeah. Realizing we don't have to be ashamed of ourselves. Where's the shame coming from? All directions at all times, or is it specific certain sources of this shame that are worse for us than others?
I think my shame is intrinsically linked to my religious upbringing and going to a Catholic elementary school, and like the Catholic guilt still haunts me sometimes. Not putting it all the blame in that direction, but I remember once it was called CCD every Wednesday. Once I left the Catholic school and went into public schooling, they were trying to teach us about STDs and how easy it is to contract one and also to become pregnant. And what they did is they put a volleyball net up in the gym, and then they started throwing ping pong balls, and they're like, for every ping pong ball that goes through the volleyball net, that's your chances of getting an STD and getting pregnant. So that probably was a visual that stuck with me for a long period of time, because that was very inaccurate.
You still remember it?
They're like, the volleyball net's a condom, and then these... So, like, even talking about safe, like, wearing a condom, like, you can still get pregnant. And that is true. You still can, and you can still get an STD, but not quite as frequently as a ping pong ball going through a volleyball net. And I think it was a scare tactic, or to promote abstinence and keep you in the dark.
When did you realize that that was insincere information?
Not until I got to college and had a gynecologist, and I also had a lot of friends with questions, and they wanted me to ask, and I decided I'm gonna ask these questions. And she referred a book to me and gave me the author and told me to go buy that book and learn about my body, essentially.
So it was that time when you called the gynecologist after the... It was...
No, this was when I was in college.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So all through high school, I lost my virginity at age 17, and that was roughly around the time my friend said, if I ever find out you're not a virgin, I'm going to be really mad at you. And I think for her, it's coming from a place of, like, preserving innocence. Like, she just wanted me to be this small girl that she grew up with and loved and adored, and didn't want me to grow up too quickly. Like, I don't think it was like a malicious, like, I'll hate you kind of anger, but nevertheless, it was still, like, I definitely had lost my virginity when she made that comment to me.
Do you think if she had known how that made you feel?
She knows now.
How did you tell her about it? How did that... Did you has her mind changed now too?
She was very open about her sexual experiences, but still remained a virgin. And she had several, like, partners, like, not one night stands, but like where you fool around with someone. And like, I only had 2 partners in my life, and I'm like, why am I so ashamed of like having vaginal intercourse when, like, oral sex, it's all sex. Anal sex is it's all just different ways of expressing those desires. And why should I be ashamed for having vaginal sex if she can honestly talk about these experiences openly? And she's still resolute about, like, maintaining virginity, but her mind on that was mostly like, you shouldn't be having sex unless you're in the economic position to handle the consequences. But she was unaware that you could contract STDs without having vaginal sex. So it was kind of, when we had that conversation, it was kind of a eye-opener for the both of us, because it was like, hey, you have to be careful. Like, you can get, like, throat cancer. I don't know. I don't know if these men you're engaging with are promiscuous. I don't know.
Wow, that's a really great point. Taking the classical, I'm going to be safe about this view, which is basically what your friend had. Maybe not ultra classical, be abstaining from everything, period. But taking that approach, put her in danger because she didn't know how to reduce the harm associated with anything. The same way you didn't, because nobody ever told you about harm reduction, except that one style of it, which had a lot of harm still in it. Wow. It's really interesting. Any advice you would give to a generation of kids at Red River who are currently right now maybe having their first periods or having their first idea of what sex is and they don't know where to go to talk about it? What do you wish you could tell them all? There may be...
Not necessarily that I could tell them all, but I would say I hope you can find some bad independent woman to talk to, and because now that I have a niece, like that little girl, like she's gonna know the ins and outs, and I'm gonna tell her, and I'm gonna say, because obviously, ideally, you don't want your kids having sex, but at the end of the day, you can't make those choices for them. They make those choices for themselves. So in the event that they do, and try to make it as non-judgmental as possible, even though I think my niece has the best parents she could possibly ever have, and they'll probably already be honest and open with her. She might not even need my help, but some things you don't want to talk to your parents about.
Yes, we should be able to talk to someone, eh? Nice.
And I really wish I had an older female role model or someone close.
Someone to talk to.
So that would be my advice, is go find a younger, older lady. I don't know.
Find someone to talk to.
Am I older? Still young.
I don't know. Yo, thank you so much. Could you say, my name is blank, I'm from Grand Forks, and maybe, I don't know, is there one more phrase to...
Oh.
So, your name and Grand Forks are what is most important to me, being heard once. Would you know how to, you want to say that?
I'm thinking. Okay. My name is Lizzy. I'm from Grand Forks, North Dakota. And I hope through this discussion that I'm having with the camera right now that someday someone will be looking at, I hope that we can end the stigma of female sexuality and talk to young women.
Sweet.
That's it.
That's it, man. So if you didn't pick it up, that was Annabelle the cat bothering us in the background there. And that was a nice afternoon I had with Lizzy. I think I dropped her off at class afterwards. And it made me feel good because when we were done interviewing, she said she was glad to do that with me, and I felt good about it too, just talking about these things. I learned a lot, and I want to thank Lizzy again. At this point, we just turned the camera around, and now Lizzy is behind the camera, and she is interviewing me about my stigma story. I just realized that I'm going to be telling a story that I've told before on the show more than once, and I feel... for anyone who actually does have to hear us tell this story over and over again, I apologize. But it's fun to revisit certain things. My friends and I, for a long time, have tried to think of a word we can use to describe the phenomenon of you learn something more about something when you retell a story. So anyway, that's the whole purpose of these stories. Let's jump to the next interview. It's mine, actually. So the only thing that if you see happen is if it doesn't focus on my face anymore, then we should
stop.
Yeah, fix it. Yeah, stuff. Yeah. But so how should we get into it? What is it I want to say exactly?
You're recording.
We can get around to it in a roundabout way a little bit. Maybe I'll just kind of start with what we were talking about before, and you and I can just chat about it for a minute or so, and then see where we go.
All right.
At the city panel they held last year, there was a comment made that there are no casual drug users. That if you were to casually drink or use marijuana, is what they were referring to, then you automatically are going to become addicted to harder drugs. And you can't sustain a casual marijuana use lifestyle. It's not possible. And I looked around the room that day at the Empire after this comment was made, and I just couldn't believe that nobody was there to, raise their hand and say, like, well, that's not right. And then I looked at myself, and I didn't raise my hand either. And I could have said all kinds of things. I guess when you hear the comment, the first thing that struck me about the comment is that you must not be including alcohol as a drug in this conversation. Else, almost everybody in the Empire probably would have raised their hand, because half those people probably go to hockey games, and that's what you do casually at hockey games, right? It's part of our culture. But, so he wasn't really including alcohol as a drug in that sense. But there must have been more people in that room who could have raised their hand and said, I casually use substance A or B or C, and I use it for certain personal reasons, and I am a functioning human being who does, goes to work and takes care of their kids and, makes something of their life and gives back to their community while doing this or that. And nobody raised their hand because of the stigma.
Were people asked to raise their hand?
No, people were not asked to raise their hand. People were not asked to come forward, and they were actually kind of told. They were told there are no casual drug users, and anybody who were to raise their hands at that moment would be basically accusing the panelist of being a liar, and nobody wants to do that, and that's not what anybody would mean by raising their hand in that sense. But because of the stigma associated with smoking marijuana or something else, nobody raised their hand. What is that? You have a toy?
That was so cute.
I don't think I've ever seen her actually play with a toy. Just walking across the room with a stuffed. Is that a chili?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Annabelle. So, as I was telling you, I first smoked marijuana in high school. After I had drunk. I had drunk with my friends first before we ever smoked. Finally, it came about my senior year of high school, probably the summer before that is when we first smoked marijuana. And the problem with the stigma associated with marijuana use is it's a big part of the gateway theory idea. Involves you try marijuana and you become addicted to these harder things. But the problem with leaving that assumption the way it is that when kids in high school try marijuana for the first time, and they suddenly truly feel like they were either, what the information they were told growing up was either wrong or it was purposefully misleading about the dangers of, say, marijuana. And when they feel that they were lied to, then they don't believe anything else they heard growing up in health class either. And we heard a lot of really important things in health class that we should be remembering. I don't mind if the cat's meowing a little bit, but it's just you giggling that's making me...
Well, she's getting high off that catnip right now.
Oh, is that?
It's filled with catnip.
Oh, yes.
It's her drug of choice.
A psychoactive substance.
Mm-hmm. It makes them excited.
Yeah.
And that's why we're hearing all these
You hear her
noises.
jingling go faster, faster. When somebody says you can't casually smoke marijuana, and then as a high school kid or something, you find out that that's not true, that you can casually use marijuana and you're not about to automatically necessarily going to slide into seeking another high and finding, another addiction into something else. It takes all the credibility out of what they were told growing up. When the same person says you shouldn't ever smoke weed because it'll kill you or turn you into a crazy person or ruin your life.
Or you become lazy.
Yep. When your same person tells you that smoking weed is going to turn you into a lazy loser, for sure, tells you that you shouldn't mix painkillers and alcohol, or you shouldn't do meth, or you shouldn't do cocaine, or you shouldn't do certain things that you can actually overdose on and that can kill you. When you hear both of these from the same person and you find out one of them is clearly not true, you can't believe the rest of it, and that's a shame, because most of what we were told growing up was good information, important information that we should remember and pay attention to, take very sincerely. But when there's a certain stigma about talking sincerely about marijuana use, it has a much bigger effect on increasing kids using harder drugs than would a more sincere kind of outlook on it. If we had grown up and they told me what marijuana really did to you, I may not have even been interested in it. And if I would have been, I would have just been more sensible about everything. I would have been more safe with other substances too. When I got my painkillers from the dentist, I took them for my pain when I needed them, and a few weeks later I still had a lot left over, and I drank and took the rest of them, and I had a really bad experience. I had a really bad time, and I'm sure they told me at some point, if they didn't, they should have, that you're not supposed to do that you can't mix opioids and alcohol or anything else because there's certain specific dangers. But I probably at that point didn't buy anything they had told me, because they were definitely wrong about marijuana, and they were wrong about some things regarding alcohol, how to use it sensibly. And so it's too bad. We have to, if we speak honestly with our kids, I think we'll be able to communicate the risks just as much as the good things about it, So, my name is Will. I grew up and was raised in Grand Forks, and ever since senior year of high school, I've been an intermittent, sometimes regular marijuana user. And despite what I was told growing up about what that means for my prospects in life, I've graduated from UND last year. I've done all these things, and last year at the city's panel, this UND Psychedelic Club was there, and they were asking questions, and we caught this moment where, for a moment, it seemed like the Psychedelic Club was not welcome in this community discussion. They asked a question, they kind of got yelled at, then they kind of lashed out, and then the whole crowd at the Empire is laughing at the Psychedelic Club member who asked a question by the end of it. And we all felt like we were very unwelcome, that this went really poorly, that we are doing a very bad job at connecting with people from the city, with the connecting all perspectives on coming together, finding solutions and stuff. That video we made won us 2 free trips to Washington, D.C., where we spoke at these conferences at the Museum Institute about what the UND Psychedelic Club is doing and about trying to bring all these perspectives together. And we got we got to speak to a lot of people. We got to get excited about these ideas, and we got validation that our voice was worth hearing, or that our message was worth. Fast forward then to this year, the city held a panel, and they told us that they want to be more inclusive, which is really what I think the Psychedelic Club wanted last year too. And the way it came out with everybody was very interesting and kind of wrong. But fast forward to this year, the president of the Psychedelic Club is invited to be on the panel at the city's film screening. And not only that, but at one point he is interrupted by applause from the whole crowd at the Empire when he mentioned that he was graduating UND and, you know, going about his life, and he's in recovery from addictions and things he's struggled with. So, last year, the UND Psychedelic Club felt super unwelcome even participating in a community discussion. And this year, the city has invited them to be a big part of that discussion, and that it's clear that we're all trying to find common ground now. And that's super important. We have to keep focusing on that, I think. How did that relate to what I was trying to say? Oh, I think I was going to try to say something like, the day we made that video, that day I had used marijuana. And I was still there. I was still actively participating in my community. The day I got my degree from UND, I'd used marijuana. The day I took my exams, when I was the editor of the student newspaper, when we interacted with the university administration for a number of different projects, when I have been a casual intermittent marijuana user, and it's not a good or a bad thing for me, but it's not a good or a bad thing for anyone, and though I still don't condone anybody use any substance for any reason. I don't know anybody's situation, right? But what am I trying to say here, Lizzy, about stigma in this?
A lot of people use marijuana and live perfectly productive, normal lives, and you wouldn't even know that they were in fact stoned, and they use it for different reasons, be it creativity or simply they have a migraine.
Yeah, marijuana for me,
cramps if you're a woman.
Mm-hmm. Marijuana throughout my whole life has, when I'm using it sensibly and when it's making sense, it has brought me closer to my family. It's given me the patience I needed to finish college. It's given me the compassion required to understand other people's perspectives, even when they're different from mine, and to have the patience to find that common ground with people you're talking to. It's been these good things for me. And in that moment, last year on the city's panel, when the claim was made that there are no casual drug users, the reason I did not raise my hand and say, at least, you know, there's one reason why that might not be the full answer, is because of the stigma. That I thought if I raised my hand, I would be looked down upon, and my opinion would count for less if I admitted to who I really was and provided a sincere piece of information, of data into this discussion. Because if we're actually trying to find the right answers, you can't listen to people make bad claims and feel so afraid that you can't even contribute to the conversation. That's not going to get us anywhere. And it's those stigmas that in high school, all it did was made me hide this stuff from my parents. I'm lucky enough to have parents who today I can talk to about all my drug use or all my problems or about all my whatevers, you know, and they change all the time. But growing up, I didn't have that relationship with my parents. They've caught me with drugs or drinking. They just, you know, get me in trouble. They say it'd be bad. So all that does is make you hide it from your parents and do all these things a lot less safely. And it sows the resentment into it. So when they grow up and they're actually involved in the community, there are bound to be these huge gaps between them and the generation above, because they were told from the beginning they're put in this double bind. Like, you're supposed to be sincere about this stuff, but but we're putting you in a situation where you obviously can't be, and that's not going to help us. So, yeah, even today, I'm scared to say that I even at one point smoked marijuana because of the stigma involved in all of this, and I don't want to send the wrong message. I want only to find the common ground that I have with everybody, no matter what their opinions are on these things or their experience with any of these things. And so I'm nervous, and I don't know if talking about it is the right thing, because it might backfire and have an opposite effect or something, but it might have a good effect. Maybe more faces coming into the light will get people to understand that this is not a dead end. There are still more solutions that we can think up, and more hands and energies we have to put into it that can make them happen. We just need to talk about it more, and the more eyes we have looking at this thing, the better chance we'll have at maybe understanding it.
Especially in an honest and safe space where you can talk openly and freely about those opinions and your experiences.
I know.
And maybe in ways where you actually did consume marijuana in an unsafe environment, but maybe that has never happened for you. But I know that it's happened to other people when mixing it with alcohol, and actually most people that I know have tried marijuana, and it was because they were drinking and their inhibitions were lowered, and then they got the spins and it was scary, and then they have this kind of perception of marijuana that actually could be inaccurate. And again, I don't think it's for everyone, because I know people who personally do not enjoy being high.
Yeah, and I know people who have totally changed their opinion on it, who smoked every day their whole life, and then one day it just doesn't suit them anymore, and they get sick or they don't like it and they stop. So things like that can happen too. Mm-hmm. I know way too many people from North Dakota and elsewhere whose kids have died from drugs, and they've been so afraid and ashamed about that and the stigma is so strong that they lie about it in their Christmas cards about what actually killed their children. They say it was a heart attack or stroke or some normal thing, and they don't say it was suicide, or it was an addiction to opiates, or it was mixing alcohol and painkillers one night or something. And then it's just amazing when you realize the same stigma that had their kid totally strangled right in front of them now has the parents just as hard, and they feel like they can't talk to anybody about it either. That's just going to make it easier to happen again and again and again to more people. So that's why we need to speak up about these things and talk more sincerely about these things, because I think we'll be very surprised how many people might raise their hand next time you ask a big room full of people how many of them are casual substance users. And the important part is how many more ideas will suddenly appear on the table when the stigma reveals them as valid. And I think we'll be amazed, and I think we'll be hopeful, and I think we'll have a chance. Okay, now we are going to jump to Luke and his story. So I think he begins, there's a point in his story where he's talking about Springfest, which is the former annual block party that would happen to all the student neighborhoods, the neighborhoods around campus by University Park in Grand Forks. For the last couple of years, I'm pretty sure not much has happened. The city kind of that's a good harm reduction conversation we should have. Look at the history of Springfest and figure out if the fact that they asked the city to do things like not grant any alcohol permits for the parks that day, and I'm not sure what else they did, but they basically canceled Springfest. Anyway, Luke shares a couple stories about noisy party violations, and a time where he and people at his house got a noisy party violation during Springfest, and another time where someone had called the cops, called the police to report him for a noisy party, but basically after talking with the officers and then calling into the police station and communicating, they were able to basically not come in, and they didn't write him a citation in that sense. So kind of some good stories and some bad stories revolving around noisy parties and as it relates to underage drinking. So we'll get to Luke talking about that right now.
Are you recording?
I am now. I'm recording.
Oh my god.
No, recording.
Okay, I'm just gonna look at you and
Yes.
pretend I'm talking it.
Yes, it'll just be like this. I'm just
Okay.
gonna hold it right here.
It's just kind of...
Yeah, that's exactly the spot I sat in earlier today when I recorded my little thing, and Lizzy was here with the camera, and I said some things I didn't know I was gonna say, and I still have to edit all of this, and I can decide again whatever goes in and out. But felt good sitting there. And then you said when we were done, you said I like this, and that made me feel good that we were doing this. So how do we talk about these negative stories while, making something positive out of them? Something that's on my
Well, for
mind.
starters, we need to turn off the amplifier because it's like... Can you hear that?
Oh, good idea. Lizzy, would you flip that thing off? Yeah.
That white noise.
Yeah.
Hear that white noise?
Good point, dude. That was...
Starters.
Is it gone?
I can't hear it.
Yeah, it's gone. Good work. Yeah, dude. So what do you think? Were we talking about stigma? Is there a time in Grand Forks you felt something about stigma?
Well, I don't know which
I'm
lane
not sure.
do you think I should go here?
I don't know. And if we come around the story backwards or something, it's fine just to get us going, and I'll move things around too. But I don't know. I liked which one felt more stigma related to you.
I feel like the noisy party can't really be... We were across the street from the park, U Park, and we had a band at the time, and we played on our back porch to random college kids, and the cops descended upon us and wrote everyone that said they were from the house a $200 noisy party violation for playing some music once again. The neighbors were all okay with it. One of them might not have been. He might have called in, but we don't really know that because the police don't have to tell you if someone called or who called. They don't have to tell you who called. They can just say, someone called in and you were being loud, so now we're going to write you up.
So without knowing who's having the problem, it's kind of hard for you to fix the problem.
Right. You can't talk to your neighbor because they don't tell you which neighbor has a problem with it. They don't have to.
That's not very conducive to communication. Doesn't seem.
No.
Not in a very sincere way.
Nope. It basically just gives the police, I don't know, in my mind, all the power to just target whoever they want. I don't know.
I think, can you tell me quickly that story about the minors in the car? I think that's the sensible jump from what you just said.
Sure.
And it's just like, yeah, what happened in the car and how does that feed off the kind of emotion, the distrust you were just talking about? You know?
Right. So my friends were riding home from a party, and
In Grand Forks?
Yep, in Grand Forks, North Dakota. They were three of them were drinking, and they were all minors, but they had been responsible and gotten a DD. One of them was driving the rest of them home. For some reason, they were pulled over, and they asked him for his license and registration, and he said, "I smell alcohol. Have you guys been drinking?" And obviously at that point you should just be honest. You should just say, "No, officer, I'm not drinking, but my friends, that's probably who you're smelling." We were at a party and I'm driving them home. And what happened was then the cop pulled them out of the car and gave the other 3 minors, and when he could have just sent them on their way for
And said, good for you for having a
DD, being so sober. I mean, he could have given the driver a breathalyzer, or, you know, tested him and made sure he was telling the truth, and then, I don't know. It's easy enough to encourage good behavior, but I don't feel like that is. So.
Yeah, so more things to build trust would be right.
Mm-hmm.
Now is the best part, the most fun part. You get to say something along the lines of, my name is Luke. I went to school in Grand Forks, or however you want to say that.
Mm-hmm. I did underage drink in college, and but I was educated about it because my parents communicated with me in a open sort of way, you know, not saying just don't drink, it's terrible for you. You know, they said if you ever need a ride, give us a call, because it might happen, you know. So I was more acclimated to it than someone who's just blindly discouraged by it all the time.
Or whose parents pretend like it doesn't even exist.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
The guy that lived above us, he was like old, and I don't know if he liked us very much, but one time Lizzy and I gave him a note, and we were like, we can hear you snoring, it sounds pretty cool, or something like that. So we tried to be his friend, you know, but he, I don't know, so didn't want to get to know us.
What was the story about that neighbor and him calling you in and all that?
Right.
So what happened, this neighbor? He
didn't like us very much because it was thin walls in the apartment, but we were playing acoustic guitars in the living room, and he called us in to the cops, and they showed up and they were like, well, you have 2 or more people sitting in a house, and I can hear you from when I enter your building, so I can technically write you a violation right now, and I don't have to tell you who called you in, but it was like -20 outside, and nobody was able to hear us except Doug. He was the man upstairs, is what we called him. And Doug backwards is God. I don't know if this is deterring from the story, but I thought it was funny.
Well, I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing. So what was the citation for?
It's called a noisy party citation, and it's 2 or more people. If a police officer can hear you outside of your residence, then he can technically write you up. And this guy did, I feel as though he probably had his opinions about us, whatever they were. Like, we were college kids, and we played acoustic guitars on sometimes, and I don't know what he thought about us. But obviously he didn't feel comfortable coming and talking to us if he had an issue, you know. So
he how many times did he call the cops on you?
Probably 3 different times, and by then we had decided that we called into the... These 2 are making me nervous. Why? Did they have to be in the room?
No, they don't.
When they were being interviewed?
We're staring.
Lizzy and I were alone last time.
That makes it easier.
Okay, Lizzy, can we go somewhere?
No, you don't have to. I just need to get over it. It's not that big a deal.
Do I look somewhere else?
No.
Make sure to mention, like, the time.
See, I knew I was, like, doing it wrong. Like, no, that's so
You're not
perfect.
doing it wrong.
Well, then, how, okay. Criticism.
You're being so judgmental
Well,
of yourself. It's okay.
Right.
You're doing good.
He had to call the cops on you, but But they didn't give you the citation, or they did give you a citation?
So, the third time that the cop came there, he basically said, once again, like, I can write you up, because technically you have broken the law. And my roommate at the time said to him, you know, like, I don't know, her uncle was a lawyer or something, and that, you know, we thought we're being entirely reasonable, you know, we're not going late into the night or anything. It's just we're playing light music on a Saturday afternoon, you know, so it was okay. And we called into the police station and said, we think this is ridiculous, and I don't know, it all could have been resolved had our neighbor just come and talk to us. But the cops ended up not coming over anymore because they, I don't know, maybe thought we were right, or...
You were able to communicate with them, right?
Yeah.
You called and you explained yourself, and then they stopped coming when it was not reasonable for them to come. Is that what happened? Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish we could do that in more situations. Just talk to each other instead of calling the cops right away. Okay, dude, just give me I need just to hear your name and the word Grand Forks. Anything else?
What, my name?
Yes. What's your first name?
My name is Luke. So you just want my first name?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever you want to say. I want you to say that you have a first name, that you're a real human being, and that you at some point are affiliated with Grand Forks.
All right. My name is Luke Hoffland. I am a real human being, and I went to college at UND in Grand Forks, North Dakota. And it was super fun.
Yeah. So, scramble on.
Scramble on!
Well, thank you everybody for listening to this week's episode of the Harm Reduction Report. As always, please remember that we neither condemn nor condone the use of any substances, illegal or otherwise. We simply are here to continue a conversation that's been going on for as long as people have been thinking about what they're putting in their bodies and how they are supposed to behave around one another. So, thank you very much. We will continue some more stigma stories next week. Please reach out to us if you'd like to get involved. Stand back on.